like I said, no substance. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Anbiya wa Mursaleen. Nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. So this is where we had left off last week. Should I focus on being wary of the shaitan or loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Imam Ghazali, he presents this point saying that, okay, if I am given a choice, like, should I choose one over the other when it comes to dealing with riyah and dealing with showing off? And he said that these things can actually be done in parallel, and one can effectively lead to the other. He uses a couple of examples. وَلْيَأْخُذُوا حِذْرَهُمْ وَأَسْلِحَتَهُم, also on their guard and armed with their weapons. وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُم مَّا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ, that prepare against them whatever forces you can muster, including war horses. So over here, what is he talking about? And what do these verses have to do with this idea of being wary of the shaitan and loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay, so the closer I am to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the nearer I draw to Him Azza wa Jal, the more difficult it becomes for the shaitan. Like, but I'm asking here very specifically, because if you look at these verses very superficially, what are they essentially telling me to do? Be cautious, right? Prepare. Be prepared. Make sure you have your weaponry on you. Make sure you're guarded. So if I just looked at them like, which one does this look like it's leaning toward? Wariness or love? This looks like it's closer to wariness, but he includes these two verses saying that no, these are a sign that you're doing both. How? Right? These things need to come hand in hand, right? These things need to go hand in hand. When and I'll use the example. I know I used the example for a car. I probably killed it, but like, so when I get in the car and I put the seatbelt on, how many times am I putting my seatbelt on? Right, I'm just putting. Huh? Oh, me, not at all. I'm like I'm really bad. It's like very. No, I don't get it. But you just put it on one time, right? You put the seatbelt on one time, just like this. The preparation, it doesn't need to happen constantly. It only needs to right. It can happen time and again, whenever you're preparing for your journey, right, or whenever you're preparing for war. But it's not something that needs to happen all the time. Something else, and I know this is a slight tangent, but here Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, He says, وَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ, that prepare against them power. And I always thought that was interesting, because when we think of power, is it negative or positive? Power is a strength, but usually when we think of power, like we always lean toward like, okay, power, more power leads to, right, arrogance and corruption and all of these things, right? But it's amazing when we look at the use of quwwah in the Quran, it doesn't come in that way, right? Quwwah always comes across as strength, it always comes across as power. And the only times I've seen strength being used in a negative light is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about dhulm, right? When He talks about oppression. And oppression is a misuse of power, right? It's a misuse of power. But power in and of itself is actually something that's positive. It's actually something that is a force that we as individuals should learn, because that is where you're going to have leverage in relationships, right? When you have power. And power, like I said, it doesn't need to be a bad thing. It doesn't need to be a negative thing. It's something that is important and essential for everyone to have. Let me think of a good example. So if you have a masjid, you have a church, synagogue, you have all of these places of worship, right? As somebody who might be trying to steal from these places, which place of worship am I going to choose? Right? Not necessarily weak leadership, right? Do I care about, like, as a thief, do I care about the leadership? Okay, so I'll go with this idea of weakness in general. Great, a weak security system. I'm going to go to the one that either is weak or it doesn't have one. I'm going to look for one that has multiple exits, right? I'm going to look for one that doesn't have a fence. I'm going to look for one that has old cameras, right? I'm going to look for all of these different things because I'm looking for weakness. Yes. See, you're getting it, man. You're getting it. So you know what's amazing? Like I know, except maybe you, like the Homeland Security meetings. I don't know if you guys ever met them. No. But basically what happens in a lot of these meetings is they talk about how to make your institution what they call a hard target, right? And what does that mean? It's basically how do I get the how do I get the predator to not choose me? And there are certain steps and certain things that we do, and even in our own homes, right? Does it make sense for me to walk around with like a lot of jewelry and showing off my money and like having wads of cash and like waving it in the air, right? I become an easy target at that point. So there are certain things that I should do in order to prevent that image going out that I am an easy target. And it's the same thing even in institution, and the same thing here when we talk about preparing in terms of power. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that preparation of power, what is the best way to keep my enemy away or off my borders or to stop infringing? Like, what is one of the first things that the Prophet ﷺ invested in? When he came to Medina, what's the first place that he established and built? His house? He built the masjid. Why? Yeah. Okay. It's to build this relationship with Allah. You're going to say, Ibrahim? Okay, so to keep the shaitan out. Absolutely. What else? Why build the masjid first? Why not build like a wall around the city? You know what I mean? Like, so you have fortification and protection. Why build the masjid first? Community, right? If if I don't know who's in my community, then how can I utilize the resources that are there? So he built the community center. He built the masjid. He built the spiritual center in order, because if the people are fortified and built up internally, it becomes that much easier to defend yourself out externally. So that was something that he did. And then he started fundraising. Right, that was one of the first things he also did. And once he did the fundraising, where did the money go? For weapons. And then, because when did Badr happen? Year 2. Pretty quick, right? It's not something that, oh, it was like year 7, right? No, it was the second year, right? Like I would say about 18 months after they arrived. So he invested in weapons. Why? Right. Well, not just fortified defenses, because right, the ayah is clear, for sure. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gave this order, but there's a wisdom behind the order, right? So he bought all these weapons. It wasn't a lot, but it was some. And then what did they do with these weapons? They raided the caravan, which was Badr. And this was a certain type of investment, because by raiding caravans, what happens? There's twofold, right? You're creating this projection of power where now the surrounding tribes, what do they see? Right, they're like, hey, well, okay, these guys we don't want to mess with because they have the weapons and they're aggressive and they're willing to use it. So you know what? We're not going. Remember how we were talking about a hard target? That's exactly how you create that hard target, by having that projection of power. And secondly, what was the second huge benefit from raiding caravans? Get more goods, right? And subhanAllah, a lot of those goods, where were they from? They're from Mecca, from a lot of the people who migrated and were forced to leave them. Right, so it was like a big part of it was reclamation and like taking back. It was like, okay, well, you're selling our stuff, we're just taking it back. So this idea of having power is something that it is fundamentally important in any relationship that we have. And if I want to negotiate with someone, why is someone going to sit on the table with me if I don't have power? Why is someone going to talk to me? They won't. Why? They don't have any reason to. If I'm bringing nothing to the table, and even when you guys go to negotiate, whether it be for a job or whether it be to open a business or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, if I want to come to you and be like, hey, listen, and I go to Alberto, I was like, hey, I want to open up a pizzeria, and he has money, and I want to borrow the money from him. Why would he give me money? Right? So the power I have is in what? Right, in the idea. It has to be a valuable idea. But it can't be like, hey, listen, I want to open up a the rings for curtains. I want to open up a rings store for those curtains. He's not interested in investing, right? He's already like, I'm out. And again, but understanding those dynamics, it can help us leverage a lot of the relationships that we have. And even in setting boundaries, like when we say things like no, in no, there's what? There's power. Because people understand that there are consequences if they ever go past that. And many people, many of us, right? We don't want consequences. Like we always try to avoid consequences. We avoid trying to get hurt. This is human nature, right? Like we don't want conflict, right? There aren't people who thrive for conflict. Actually, people want less conflict. And if I understand where a person says no, then it allows me to stay away from that space. So regardless, this idea of power and preparation, this can be done very much in parallel with a love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I'm doing these things because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding me to do that. And if I'm doing the things that He commands me to, this is my means and my way of what? Showing love to Him Azza wa Jal. So he's saying the verses that he brought were the enemy you can see. And the enemy we cannot. How do we prepare for that? Right? I have to trust Allah. Like I have no choice. Like it's not like, okay, let me pack my Quran and my dua book and my wird book, right? Like I and I have like a belt, like a Batman belt, right? These things I memorize, right? Because they're tools that I use. But ultimately, those tools are all reliant on what? On my belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of it. And the thing is, like, with the physical enemy, yeah, I might be able to learn how to fight. I may be able to learn how to use a knife. I might be able to learn how to use a gun, right? There are different ways that I can implement self-defense. But at the end of the day, those things are great against physical enemies. But unseen enemies, like the shaitan, or even unseen enemies who are planning and plotting against me, do I have any control over that? Can I do anything? If someone is plotting and scheming and trying to bring me down, what can I do about that? Nothing. And not just that, I can't do anything about it. Do I need to worry about it? No. When should I worry about it? Right? When there's something I can actually do about it, right? Like when it's actually brought to my attention and I have the ability to do something about it. But if I'm in a situation where it's like, okay, there's this newspaper that is talking about me, and I don't know anybody who works in that newspaper, right? Even if it's the Times of Israel, right? You know what I mean? They they're speaking about me. True story. Like I can't do anything about it, right? There's nothing I can say. I don't know anybody who sits on their board. I don't know anybody who I can talk to like have that article and stuff removed. So what do? I just ignore it. I ignore it. You know, I tell people not to click on it to increase the hits. Like, you know what I mean? Like there are things that you cannot do, and there are things that you don't need to worry about, and you just continue doing good deeds. You continue working toward good, because that is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bless us. Ibn Muhayriz, he said, a prey you see but doesn't see you is likely to be caught. So if I'm the predator and I see the prey and the prey doesn't see me, what's going to happen to that prey? It's going to get caught because it's unaware. It's unaware. You don't accept? Oh, okay. And a predator that sees you but you don't see it is likely to catch you. What is he talking about here? He's talking about the shaitan. If I am constantly unaware of the shaitan, then what's going to happen? The shaitan's going to catch me. And subhanAllah, the thing, our relationship with the shaitan is that he's always trying to undermine us. And he's not always going to try to undermine us the same way, in the same method every single time. Right? He's got a playbook. And how big is his playbook? Right? right? It's pretty deep. You're talking about from pre-Adam, right? Pre-Adam until now. Right? He's got If it was the commander's playbook, they'd always be losing. But and the thing is, like, you know, we clearly see in history where there are times where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows that he was successful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about evil people, and he talks about good people. So there are times where he fails, and there are times where he succeeds. It's my job to be on guard. It's my job to be aware, to make sure that I am equipped and I have the skill set to battle him. So busying myself with Allah does not contradict staying away from what He warns from. What does He mean here? Hmm. All right, let's talk about a deed. Let's talk about lying. Right? Let's make it practical. Right? Because remember what we were talking about? We're we're talking about how to be wary of the shaitan and gain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love, and how these things can be done in parallel. If I'm actively working to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and actively working to gain His love, automatically, what is that going to prevent me from doing? Or from falling into sin. If I'm working to gain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, will I want to lie? Will I want to steal? Will I want to hurt others and take advantage? Right? And that's how these things work in parallel. It becomes more so about gaining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, understanding some of the tools and methods that the shaitan uses so that we can learn to protect ourselves, and in the meantime draw nearer to and gain a better relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he talks about this other group that says that, oh, you don't need to I forgot what the second group was, man. He mentioned three. Oh, here are the three. So he says that vigilance is necessary for the weak only. He says vigilance is necessary for the weak only. And why does he say that's not a tenable position? How come he says that's not a realistic goal? You're right, right? From a completely logical perspective, you're right. But he brings a stronger argument. You're already in the weak group? Allahu Akbar. Again, this is a logical argument. It's good. I like that. It's about the same area. He brings an excellent example. He brings examples to show us that why this is not realistic. This is not tenable. You will never reach a point where you do not need to be vigilant anymore. He uses the examples of the Anbiya. Right? So he uses the examples of the prophets on how even the shaitan, what would they do? They would try to distract them. And by using that example, what is he implicitly saying? Right? If the strongest of mankind have this distraction, then who am I? As simple as that. Oh, the third one, I think there's a balance. It's the balance. Oh, they say it's necessary. Like we have to guard against the shaitan. No problem. He didn't give straws? So again, you have to be vigilant, and we had said that being vigilant is something that is important for every single one of us. Nobody is exempt from being vigilant against the shaitan. We all have to be, and we have to work in parallel in seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love and mercy. So he's talking about preparation doesn't nullify reliance, right? This idea of what tawakkul is, even this manifests in different ways. And I'll use the example of medicine. In Islam, am I obligated to take medicine? Okay, interesting. If it saves my life. So if a person has cancer, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and our families, are they obligated to take chemo? Huh? Okay, so you said if it saves your life. What a certainty? It has to reach yaqeen? 100%? What medicine gives 100% return, bro? Even that, some bacteria become immune to certain types of antibiotics. Huh? You will never reach yaqeen, bro. I don't know. I don't know what kind of. Hey, what the? I need to get on your medical plan. We need to have a conversation after class, man. I need that insurance. But so this idea of taking medicine is something that Islam's not opposed to, right? It's always something that's important. It's something that we should take medication. And I have the option. If I have a headache, what can I do? Right, I can take an ibuprofen. I can take an Advil. Right, I can take Motrin, whatever. It doesn't matter. I can take any drug that will help me with my headache. And if a person is even on their deathbed, and a doctor tells them, like, hey, listen, this medicine has an 80%, 90% success ratio, am I obligated to take these medications? Right, it's up to me. It's my personal decision. And subhanAllah, it's actually, I did a grief counseling training when I was in New Jersey at one of the hospitals. They said, and I thought this was amazing, that people who are EOL, who are in end of life, right? They're in hospice care or whatever the case might be, right? And they're about to pass away. And those who opt not to continue treatment and spend time with their families, they actually have a better quality of life than people who end their lives on treatment. And I was amazed, like, and why is that? And they tend to live longer too, by the way. Yeah. Big pharma. Hmm. Right. Sure. So this idea of actually enjoying the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, because once I stop thinking, once I submit to the fact that I'm going to pass, and I submit to the fact that I'm going to die, what can I focus on? I can, right, making most of the time I have left and focusing on the relationships that I have around me, because guess what's not on my periphery anymore, and guess what I'm not worried about anymore? No, the death itself. Right? I've already submitted to it. Like, I've submitted to the fact that, you know what, I'm going to pass away, I'm going to die, and I can actually focus on those things that are important to me. Like, what if we had that mindset today? Right? We would have more of a fulfilling life. If I'm not constantly worried about death, and death is something that we should worry about in the sense, like, okay, how have I prepared for it? And even this hadith, I'm sure you guys are familiar. If 3 days have passed, make sure you have a will. And I always used to wonder about this hadith, like, well, why is that, considering that inheritance laws are already written, right? Everything is written. And now I've reached an age and a point in my life where I'm like, oh, how does my family know where my money is? And this is something I want all of us to think about. How many of you might have investment accounts? How many of you might have cryptocurrency? How many of you might have 401ks or Roth IRAs, right? And if my family doesn't know where that money is, what's going to happen? Right, somebody's going to take it. And guess who didn't benefit from it? The people who were actually supposed to benefit from it. That's the importance of a will, not on how much is to be distributed. Right? That's set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Islamic governance, even if I left it, right? Even if I didn't put anything, how would the wealth be distributed? According to Sharia, right? And did I have to say anything? Did I need to make a will, like, okay, 1/8 needs to go here and 1/6 needs to go here? I didn't have to do any of those things. The reality is, the will is important so that our families know where our wealth is. And if I truly want to take care of them, then I have to make sure that they have access to those things. And this is part of tawakkul, right? This is part of relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are different ways to prepare. Like, if I want to prepare for my death, then part of that is living my life in the right way. And if I'm worth, like for example, like this body is an amana, right? This is a trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me. And part of that trust is what? Taking care of it. Make sure I'm eating well. Make sure I'm sleeping. Make sure I'm exercising. Because what happens if we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our stomach complains that all he fed me was junk food? Right? It doesn't mean that we can't splurge from time to time. Like, that's something that's completely reasonable and fine. You have a hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. where the Prophet ﷺ gave him a bowl of milk, right? And he drank, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's like, go ahead, drink some more. He's like, I finished the whole bowl, right? So it was like a huge bowl of milk. He's like, I finished the whole bowl. He's like, I felt like the milk was going to come out of my ears. And it's fine. Every once in a while, splurging, every once in a while enjoying, there's nothing wrong with that. But should that be the default? No, right? That's not the default. Occasional is acceptable. At the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us different trusts. Whether that trust be in the form of a home, whether it be in the form of different relationships that we have in terms like spouses or siblings or parents or friends. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us different material items, right? So even if I have a phone, can I just abuse it? Someone might be like, oh, it's like a non-living object, right? It's inanimate. Or like I have a chair. Can I just take the chair and just start bashing it on the ground, saying, oh, it's mine? I'm sorry? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do. Or like getting angry and punching the wall, right? Like these things, these aren't healthy outlets. This isn't the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all of these different material goods around us. We have to take care of them. We're obligated to take care of them. And it's amazing how we have a hadith that talk about how to deal with certain animals. So there, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, there was a woman who entered paradise because of a dog and a woman who entered the hellfire because of a cat. And I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with this hadith. But the woman who entered paradise because of a dog, she was a prostitute, and she gave a dog water to drink. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His infinite mercy, decided to have mercy on her because of that deed that she performed and enter her into the paradise. A prostitute. Old woman, she trapped a cat. She literally trapped it, and the cat died of starvation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would ask her. It's like, well, okay, you didn't want the cat. Fine, understandable. Why didn't you just let it out? At least it could have hunted on its own. At least it could have done something on its own. But you holding it and starving it like this. And subhanAllah, in that hadith, letting a cat go is not oppression. It's amazing, right? Like letting the cat go is not oppression. But holding onto it and forcing it to not be able to eat, that is. And she's put in the hellfire because of that. Like this is the amana, this is the trust that we're given. It's like, are we fulfilling those trusts? And are we preparing ourselves in the right way? It's amazing the number of tools that He Azza wa Jal has given us so that we can prepare and so that we can better ourselves. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all trustworthy. Ameen. And it becomes so much easier to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we realize ultimately everything's in His hands. Right? There's very little we actually have control over. It's like, yes, okay, I need to make sure I have the skill set, make sure that my resume looks good, make sure that I'm applying to the right places, making sure I'm prepping for my interviews. At the end of the day, is it necessary that I get the job? No. I do my market research, right? I look at the local businesses. I start seeing what sells. I look at the demographics. I'll even look at the local crime reports to see like, hey, is this a safe neighborhood or not? And then I'm like, okay, everything looks good. I open up my business. Does that guarantee that it's going to succeed? No. But in both of these situations, I did everything that was within my ability. So what can I take solace in? I went through all this trouble. I invested all this money, and my business failed. How should I feel? Okay, maybe fulfillment. I think that person might be a little bit, you know what I mean? I should right, content. Why should I feel contentment? Right, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. And what? I did my best. Right? I actually went through all the steps. And essentially Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands us to do two things. Right? He commands us to seek counsel, and He commands us to make istikhara, right? And to seek His blessing. And if I did those two steps, and I did them properly, can there be gaps? And sometimes, like, you know how sometimes we do something, can there be gaps in how we do those things? Yeah, absolutely, right? But that's okay. As long as I'm following those general guidelines. Because when it fails, it's okay, right? That was meant to happen. But a lot of times those things fail, or we have our own shortcomings because we didn't follow those steps. Like we didn't fulfill those. And many times it's because we weren't honest. We weren't honest with ourselves. We weren't honest with our decisions. We weren't honest many times with the advice that we were giving. It's like we will see red flag after red flag after red flag. and we'll still be like, oh no, well that was because of this, or that was because we'll start making excuses. And a lot of times we'll make those excuses because we're emotionally invested. And that's where it becomes a problem, right? Emotions are good, right? There's nothing wrong with emotions. There's nothing wrong with being happy, sad, angry. You know what I mean? Like pain, like all of these things are good because they're gauges on kind of how do we interact and deal with the world around us. But if I act on those emotions, that's where I'm going to run into problems and issues. Like I should always try to act as logically as possible. So whether it comes to opening a business, whether it comes to getting married, or whether it comes to getting a job, whether it comes to like whatever the case might be, I have to try to be as logical as possible and kind of remove my emotions from those situations. Because if I put too much emotion, it's going to cloud my judgment. And that's where we end up lying to ourselves. So, how does one be vigilant, right? So, we want to be this person, right? We want to be the person who's vigilant. We want a person who stands up and protects ourselves against shaitan. So, Imam Ghazali, he presents this. He's like, it's a balancing game. And you balance, it's the balances between what? Caution and remembrance. How? If I want to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be cautious, these are the things that he's saying that we have to constantly balance. And if we're able to balance those things, then that's where we're good, right? That's where we've reached that vigilance point. But if we fall one way too much or fall the other way too much, then we haven't successfully carried out and been wary in the way that we should. So, what can happen if you overcorrect? And I know a lot of times we talk about when it comes to certain characteristics that we strive for, that we need to overcorrect our gauges so that they become balanced. He's saying here, when it comes to this issue, because it's an actual balance, right? It's not a gauge. This one is actual balance. And the moment I overcorrect, it's going to cause a problem. If somebody is too cautious, and he lacks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's remembrance, it becomes a heart that is easy to overcome, meaning that I'm always so scared. What's going to happen? Is it easy to take advantage of somebody who's strong or somebody who's weak? Right? It's easy to take advantage of that. So if I'm constantly scared, I'm constantly cautious, the shaitan is going to come at me one way or another, and he's going to overtake my heart. And many times, this manifests itself in the way of waswasa. Right? You know, so like those whispers and things that we get. What? We're just so constantly worried, man. Did I break my wudu? Did I pray? Oh, you know, did I give my zakat? Was I in the third rak'ah? Right? And some of us might suffer from this level of waswasa. But that person is that much more vulnerable because they're constantly doubting themselves, because they're constantly cautious. Like, what does this come from? It comes from over caution, right? Like when we're too cautious. And that over caution, guess what? The shaitan, man, he's having a field day. He'll come right in, be like, nah, you actually didn't make wudu. Like, no, you actually, not only did you miss the third and fourth rak'ah, you missed the second rak'ah too, right? You know, and he'll just take advantage of those things. And what happens to such people is that they become so cautious. They become so cautious. It's like, man, I started praying, okay, and then I need to do all my sunnah. Okay, I need to dress a certain way. Okay, I need to make sure I'm going to the masjid for every prayer. How sustainable is that lifestyle? Like, I need to do all my I'm going to fast every Monday, Thursday. I'm going to fast 3 days. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to fast every other day. Can some people successfully do that? Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry? It's tough, right? It's difficult. How do you know a person is on a path to failure? Like, because their trajectory isn't like this. Usually such people, how does their trajectory look? It usually looks like that, right? It's like all of a sudden, like they read a few hadith, or they'll read some verses, or they'll start practicing, and what happens is like they'll kind of skyrocket. I'm sorry? Right? You just like all of a sudden they're like doing everything all at once, right? They're praying all their sunnah, they're doing all these fasts, and like, you know, they're reading Quran every day, and they're memorizing, they're sitting in like 20 classes, and it's like yo, what is happening? It's like, yeah, you know, I'm just going here and I'm going here, and they're just kind of running around, and what happens? Like, okay, after a month, yeah, no, we burn out. Why do we burn out? Absolutely. Can I digest an entire meal in one gulp? I can't. And even when we talk about our path to paradise, it's not a sprint, right? It's just not. It's a marathon. And a marathon takes time. And even when we talk about digesting religious knowledge, I have to take it piecemeal. I have to take it little by little. I can't just gulp it all. And even if I do, my stomach is probably gonna get messed up. It's the same thing with Islam. Like if I try to take in too much, I'm not gonna be able to digest it all. I'm not gonna be able to understand it all. And not just that, many times when people take in Islam in this way, Islam becomes very black and white to such people. Very black and white. It's like it's either halal or haram. It's either right or wrong, or it's either this or that. It's like, well, didn't the Prophet talk about there being a gray area? Yeah, the gray area, you have to stay away from that too, right? So everything just becomes black and white. And when a person lives such a binary lifestyle, it's just not sustainable. It becomes too difficult. Just can't navigate life. Like all of a sudden, when such an individual enters the real world, they're like, oh well, okay, well no, I can't get a credit card, and I can't work over here, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. Such people, I usually ask them one question. It's like, okay, well, what can you do? Because last time I checked, if I looked at the things that were impermissible, not that long a list, right? It's actually a pretty fixed list of the things that I can't do. How come for you, like, the entire focus is this list? Like, what happened to all the things that we can do? And the different ways that we can participate? And the different ways that we can engage? And it's just like this inverse view of Islam, of again, this binary type of thinking, that either you're in or you're out. And how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describe that? He says, لِتَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبِ. He says that you will fall into extremism actually lying on Allah. But this is what it leads to. And it's amazing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word iftira. He uses the word extremism to actually describe these people who just go around like labeling things. Like, this is halal, this is haram, this is haram, this is haram, right? That's not how the religion is supposed to be. And the things that are haram, we know, like lying, stealing, backbiting, riba, zina, right? They're very clear. All the other stuff, okay, let's have a conversation. Okay, well, I think there are elements of this that are haram. I think these are the type of transactions you need to stay away from. Okay, when you go to this place, like try not to work in this section, right? You know what I mean? It becomes a lot more practical when you're actually able to parse out some of these things and give paths to navigation instead of just closing the door altogether. Right? It's just not going to work. Like this, it's not reality. And the Prophet ﷺ, he came to show us a practical way of living our life and living Islam. If I'm too focused on dhikr, eventually his heart will be consumed by the remembrance of shaitan. I thought this one was interesting. So if a person is only engaged in dhikr and doesn't care about protecting himself from shaitan, he says that he'll be consumed by the remembrance of shaitan. How's that? Okay, there's no preparation. I agree with all that, but how can this become an avenue to that? The dhikr is one of the tools that we said protect us, right? So why is it that he's saying this? Right, it can become out of habit. So why is that a negative thing? Why would that be a problem? Okay, maybe. Mhm. All right, it loses meaning. So okay, I think you guys are starting to get a little bit closer. If it loses meaning, all right, defense is good. Look, listen, absolutely. But I'm saying if it becomes just lip service, what happens? But what can that lead to? Okay, somebody's just doing lip service, and what? What does it lead to? Thank you. It leads to riyah. Because what is motivating me now? Now, you guys were getting there. It was just the path was much slower. They didn't want to take like the hard trajectory, right? It was a marathon, right? But so it leads to riyah. Because at the end of the day, someone might be like, okay, if it's only lip service, what is motivating you? What's motivating you to even do that lip service? There has to be something. There has to be something that's pushing me to do that. And when he talks about that it'll be consumed by the remembrance of shaitan, what? Because he's only concerned with what people think about him. He's only concerned with how people will react to him. He's only concerned about the status that he's going to be given and the preference that he's going to be given. Right? That's exactly what the remembrance of shaitan is, because of that love of status and that love of attention, and that love of the people turning toward him and calling him a scholar, or calling him a zahid, or calling him like, oh yeah, mashallah, I see him all the time. Like every time I look at him, there's like dhikr beads in his hands. He's making dhikr in front of everyone. Even when he's giving you salam, he's making dhikr. It's like I mean, I'm not judging anyone. It's just weird. I don't know. I don't see the Prophet ﷺ like that, right? I don't see him interacting with people like that. Maybe they're sincere. May Allah bless them. But at the end of the day, it's important for us to kind of be aware of these things, because once we fall into life, there's something that's motivating us. There's something that's moving us. There's something that's causing us to say this and to even make that lip service. And that is the shaitan. Because the shaitan, remember, we said he's going to slip in different ways. And the easiest way for him to slip in is to keep pushing us to do certain things, and be like, oh man, isn't it great how people are dealing with you, and how people are looking at you, and the status that they're giving you, how people are appreciating you, how people are giving you special treatment, how people are bringing you coffee. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that can entice us or push us to continue doing actions, and if we look at the core of those actions, they're completely devoid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us sincere. So, what is the best way to balance? He says the truth. That's the easiest way. What does he mean, the truth? I know I talk about it a lot, right? I talk about honesty, like, being honest. So when he's saying truth, what does he mean here? To yourself, man. Like, it's that recognition and understanding where I'm at. One of the most difficult things, remember, we talk about like looking in that spiritual mirror, right? It's tough. Nobody likes looking in that mirror and being like, man, I'm a scumbag, right? Nobody likes, nobody likes that. But if I'm able to realize that, I'm saying even in that, there's a blessing. Why? Because the moment I realize it, what can I do? I can change, right? I can actually change. I was like, man, if I look in this mirror and I'm like, man, like my belief is weak. I fall into sin, right? Like, I'm not courageous. And the idea is obviously isn't to be like a self, to beat oneself up and like, for it to become a pity party. It's a recognition. And the moment I recognize those things, I can start working on them and I can start improving myself. So that's why it's a blessing. And that's why we have to take advantage of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us in so many ways. And like, one of the greatest blessings is awareness. And it's something that we like overlook so often. Just hearing and just sitting down, or someone just telling us, is like, hey, when you do this or when you do that, it's like, man, that's actually really cowardly. Like, I think that's great advice. I think it's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. So, it if you're talking about advice for ourselves, that's easy. Because if I have good friends, what can I do? I can seek their counsel. I'm like, yo, hey, listen, I'm having problems here and here, and dealing with this person and that person, blah blah blah. And a lot of times, if a person is honest, they'll be like, yeah, bro, you're like, because you're toxic, right? And then all of a sudden, what happens? We're like, wait, really? Me? Like, why? It's like, yo, you don't remember when you said this to so and so, and you did this to this person, and you did that, and all of a sudden, you're like, oh wow, I mean, yeah, I am like that. I didn't, you know what I mean? And having that awareness is important. I had a family come in. It was a daughter and a father, and she was like, I need him to apologize, and I need him to realize why he's apologizing. And I was like, well, if you don't tell him, how is he going to know what to? Well, he should see it. And it's scary how the one who was oppressed can now become the oppressor, right? Because they're like, they have this power over this person and forcing them and wanting them to realize something. instead of actually having the humility, being like, hey, you did this and I didn't appreciate that, and I would like you to apologize for it. That actually requires humility. Yeah. Uh huh. With a friend? No. So a friend has to ask. You can, but you have to ask, right? The only way into these things is with a question. It's like, hey, listen, something's really been bothering me. Is it cool if I share it with you? Because the moment the person says yeah, and the people who are like really arrogant and narcissistic, they'll be like, what do you mean? And you'd be like, hey, I didn't appreciate when you, and they'll just immediately get defensive, right? And the moment a person gets defensive, what can you do? Just back off, right? There's no reason to engage. And after backing off, you know what the next step should be? Like reevaluating that relationship. Like, and the thing that's scary for us is walking away from relationships. Like it's tough. It's hard. Like it's like, man, I've been with this, like I've been friends with them since high school, or like we get along on so many things. It's like I just really, but it's like, well, this person isn't honest. Like relationships are built on honesty. Like they just are. Even when we talk about the Prophet ﷺ, like I could go around, I could be like, hey, give me one characteristic of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm sure every single, like we could come up with a characteristic for every single person about the Prophet ﷺ without repetition. But what are the two that come to mind when we talk about him the most? Sadiq and Amin, right? That he was honest and trustworthy. Why? Because that's what society is built on, right? If there's no honesty and there's no trustworthiness, how can we interact and how can we deal with each other? How can I let people borrow stuff? How can I purchase stuff? Like, how can I walk in front of somebody's house? How can like these are the things that societies are built on, and that's why honesty is so important. And where does honesty start? It starts with ourselves. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Just a reminder, inshallah, after Salat al-Maghrib, the cafe is open downstairs for anyone that would like coffee or tea. Again, the cafe, inshallah, Minara Cafe is open after Salat al-Maghrib, downstairs in the basement for anyone that's interested in coffee or tea.